Hi everyone. So now in this we will be talking about the questions that were asked in the FMG August 2020 exam. And as we all know that this was a major change in the pattern when from the factual questions more conceptual questions were asked in the paper, and instead of 13 to 14 questions there were around 30 questions from the radiology that were there. So in this we will be talking about what are the kind of questions that were asked and how we can predict that what are the new questions that can be prepared for the exam. Okay, so this was one question, and then identify the mark structure shown by the arrow. So there was an image of the brain that was shown to you, and most likely this structure was marked. Now if you look at this, you could see the orbits. So that means it is the basal section of the brain that has been taken. All these that you could see are the cerebral hemisphere. Okay, I hope all of you can easily appreciate. And this structure that you could see in the center is midbrain. Okay, it's midbrain. Had it been slightly more down section and you would have been seeing the cerebellum posteriorly, then the pons would have been at that particular level, but this is cerebellum. This is midbrain. As you could see, you are not, it is a much higher section that you could see. So please make sure that the cross-sectional anatomy of not just this, the entire brain on a transverse section, that you are aware of. Okay, we have done that in our classes in a much detailed manner, and I always believe that this is the free marks for our students. Okay, so make sure you are able to answer them correctly in the exam, irrespective of the exam that you are writing. So this is a midbrain. Okay, there was another image. Identify the structure marked as O on the CT head given below. So now this is the structure that you could see. You all can see that this is ocular globe. Okay, now we all know this is a CT scan again of the brain. This is the right side, this is the left side, this is anterior, this is posterior. Now from the ocular globe, from the center, there is a structure that is projecting like this, and that is nothing but optic nerve. That is nothing but the optic nerve. This structure that you could see laterally is the lateral rectus muscle, and the muscle that is medially is the medial rectus muscle. Okay, so lateral rectus, medial rectus, and in the center what you are seeing is the optic nerve. So this is optic nerve. Where the optic nerves are joining, that will form the optic chiasma. Okay, so that is optic nerve. Okay, a 65-year-old female fell down in the bathroom and sustained head injury. CT scan was performed. Now see, fell down in the bathroom. So this is not a very high velocity trauma. This is a trivial trauma. Now please remember one of an important part, the clinical history plays a very important part. We know that a trivial injury is commonly associated with subdural hemorrhage. A high velocity trauma is usually associated with EDH. Okay, CT scan was performed. What is the likely diagnosis? Now what you could see in this CT, you are seeing a crescent shape hyperdense collection. A crescent shape hyperdense collection, as you could see here, you know that this is definitely a subdural hemorrhage. Now please remember that there are a few more questions that can be asked on this particular point over here. Now this is an acute SDH. Sometime what happens is that the history was 3-week back or 4-week back, and in these cases thus density start decreasing, and then it will become subacute SDH. Okay, subacute SDH. Now the point is the subacute SDH become nearly isodense to the brain parenchyma. A lot of time it becomes slightly difficult for you to understand. So whenever there is a trivial trauma, there is a history of some the patient is taking some aspirin or some anticoagulant which are making the patient prone for bleeding the issues, then think of that they are talking of subdural hemorrhage, and depending on the timing, depending on the density, you can pick up an answer. If it is acute, it will be hyperdense. If it is subacute, it will be isodense, and if it is chronic, it is hypodense. It is hypodense. So according to that, you will be able to pick it up in a much better way. Okay. Young male brought unconscious to the hospital with external injury. What is happening is, that means there is a trauma. There is a trauma, and after trauma, patient is unconscious. Okay, keep on seeing what are the important points that are given in the history. CT brain show no midline shift. There are no findings on the CT scan apart from few petechial hemorrhages. So that means in the brain there are small hemorrhagic foci that you are seeing. Okay, they have not specified, but we know from history they are pointing towards that these petechial hemorrhages are at grey white matter junction. What is the probable diagnosis? So you are dealing with a case of diffuse axonal injury. Okay, diffuse axonal injury. Please remember, whenever there is trauma plus unconscious patient, think of TBI, traumatic brain injury. Traumatic brain injury, you can rule out EDH, you can rule out SDH, you can rule out SDH, you can rule out intracerebral hematoma. If none of them is seen, think of a diffuse axonal injury. Now it is important to note at this point of time that the investigation of choice to diagnose diffuse axonal injury is actually MRI. Okay, but the first investigation that is done is always a CT, not to diagnose diffuse axonal injury, but to rule out other causes of unconsciousness. Okay, next. A 70-year-old hypertensive patient has presented with sudden severe headache. Okay, now see, 70-year-old age, hypertension, sudden severe headache. His BP was found to be 220/120. That means very high BP. And NCCT of the head was done and shown below. Now what do you see on this NCCT? First of all, we need to identify that this is a CT scan. Look at the cortical bone. It is so white, so it has to be CT scan. Is it normal or abnormal? This is definitely abnormal. Where is the abnormality? Abnormality is on the right side. Okay, go back to our class and then you will be able to recall it in a much easier way. And that is a protocol that we follow in any image. Identify the body part, identify the image, identify the section, then think whether it is normal or abnormal. Now once it is abnormal, where is the abnormality? Abnormality is on the right side. What is the nature of abnormality? There is a hyperdensity in the brain parenchyma. In the brain parenchyma, where? In the region of putamen. In the region of putamen or lentiform nucleus. In the region of putamen or lentiform nucleus, and it is hyperdensity. So you are dealing with a case of putaminal bleed. On the basis of history, we can also identify the most common site of hypertensive bleed in the brain is putamen. Most common site of bleed in hypertensive patient in the brain parenchyma is putamen. Okay, this is a putaminal bleed. This is not an intraventricular hemorrhage. It will be seen in the ventricular system. This is not a section at the level of pons. So this is definitely not pons, and a subarachnoid hemorrhage will be seen as the bleed in the sulcal spaces or in the fissures. Okay. Alright. Now this is a standard image that every year we are getting in the exam. We all have to know that. We have already spoken a lot about the different shapes of skull and all in our different classes. What is the most likely cause of the finding shown in the below radiograph of the skull? Now what you are seeing is a typical hair on end appearance. Now we know hair on end appearance, the classical diagnosis is thalassemia. So look for thalassemia. If thalassemia is not given in the choice, look for hemolytic anemia. Look for hemolytic anemia. So this is hemolytic anemia. Okay, we all know. Multiple myeloma shows raindrop appearance. Raised intracranial tension shows silver beaten appearance. Okay, silver beaten appearance. Okay. Gold standard investigation for FES. Okay, you people have read in your ENT what is FES? Functional endoscopic sinus surgery. Functional endoscopic sinus surgery. Now, if you want to do that, you need to see the anatomy of the paranasal sinuses, and we know that the most useful imaging investigation to ascertain the anatomy of the paranasal sinuses is a CT scan. So CT scan of the paranasal sinuses in coronal plane. CT scan of the paranasal sinuses in the coronal plane is the best investigation to look at the sinus anatomy for FES. A chest radiograph of a 45-year-old patient is shown below who has undergone a prior open heart surgery. What is the most likely finding on the given radiograph? Now, if you see this, now what you see in this particular image, there is a right-sided pleural effusion. But when you look at the choices, you don't see any choice as the pleural effusion. So you have to see, you could see these sternotomy sutures. So that means this patient has undergone a cardiac surgery. And then you see this metallic ring shaped structure at this location. So this is a characteristic location of prosthetic mitral valve. A characteristic location of a prosthetic mitral valve. Now this was a slight bouncer in the exam. It was usually not expected in the foreign medical graduate screening exam, the questions like this, but yes, the question was there. So you have to remember that this was an image of a prosthetic mitral valve. Okay. Next question. As we all know that a chest X-ray forms almost the most important imaging investigation in the exam, and that is why whenever we do the radiological class, we make sure that a chest X-ray is something that has been discussed in great detail. Okay, so a 55-year-old female came to the OPD for a post-surgery follow-up. Now just think, look at the clinical history and then try to identify the diagnosis. That means a surgery has been done in the past. A chest radiograph was performed. What is the most likely diagnosis? Now, rather than looking at the choices, I want you to pay attention to the image. Now, look at this chest X-ray. Now, what do you see? See, this area is so hyperlucent. Okay. So hyperlucent. Look at the lucency on both the sides. And then you see carefully, you see that the breast shadow is seen on the left side, but you don't see any breast shadow on the right side. So that means some surgery has been done in which the breast has been removed. So this is a right-sided mastectomy. This is a case of a right-sided mastectomy. Had it been a pulmonary metastasis, you would have seen some variable size nodules. I don't see them. Fibroadenoma will not be seen on a radiograph, it will be seen on a mammography. And this is definitely not emphysema. Emphysema will be a bilateral problem. So this is a case of right-sided mastectomy. Okay. Next question. A 45-year-old patient presents with high-grade fever, chills and cough with expectoration. The chest radiograph were taken and shown below. What is the most likely diagnosis? Now what do you see? Now we all know about Silhouette sign, and we know that in the Silhouette sign, if there is a silhouetting of the right heart border, you are dealing with a middle lobe consolidation. If the right heart border is not silhouetted, you are dealing with a lower lobe pathology. Similarly, if there is a silhouetting of the left heart border, you are talking about a lingular consolidation. If the if the left heart border is visualized, you are talking about a lower lobe consolidation. So you could see a consolidation which is silhouetting the right heart border. And if the right heart border is silhouetted, you know you are talking with the right middle lobe consolidation. You are talking of right middle lobe consolidation. Okay. Next. What is the interpretation of the given chest radiograph? Very, very simple image. We all know that this image has to be there in the exam. What you see? Area of hyperlucency. Area of hyperlucency devoid of vascular marking and separated from the lung by a visceral pleural line. Area of hyperlucency devoid of vascular marking and separated from the normal lung by a visceral pleural line. You are dealing with a case of pneumothorax. You are definitely dealing with pneumothorax. Again, unilateral cannot be emphysema. If there would have been an air fluid level, it would have been hydropneumothorax, and a pericardial effusion will give a typical money bag appearance surrounding the heart. So this is a case of pneumothorax. There were two images. Now the previous image, if you look at this, the air was going right up to the CP angle. Whereas if you see this particular image, what do you see? Hyperlucency with an air fluid level. So if you see a hyperlucency with an air fluid level, think of hydropneumothorax. Think of hydropneumothorax. Okay. So pneumothorax tension pneumothorax, hydropneumothorax. These are the images which are very frequently asked in every exam, and you all have to be aware of them without a doubt. Okay, now this was a typical clinical question. A 43-year-old female presented with mild fever and weight loss. Her ACE, angiotensin convertase enzyme levels were found to be elevated. Okay, this clinches to a diagnosis. Chest radiography revealed bilateral hilar lymphadenopathy as shown below. Now these are those questions when even the image is not given, still you can make the diagnosis. So image is only contributory. So point to be noted over here is that do not think that in an image based question all the diagnosis will be there on the image. The clinical history, the clinical parameters that are given plays a very important part in solving these questions. So mild fever, weight loss, ACE levels are elevated, chest radiograph, bilateral hilar lymphadenopathy, virtually it is diagnostic for sarcoidosis. Sarcoidosis. You also see right paratracheal lymphadenopathy, and that is typically called as 1, 2, 3 sign on a chest x-ray. 1, 2, 3 sign on a chest x-ray. Do not do this mistake, and a fever and weight loss, you immediately jump onto the TB. Examiner will not give you the history of increased ACE level and specifically bilateral hilar lymph node. Bilateral hilar lymphadenopathy with increased ACE level is virtually diagnostic for sarcoidosis. Okay. A 35-year-old female with known case of HIV, that means she is immunocompromised. With CD4 count of less than 300, presented with fever, dyspnea and cough. Fever, dyspnea and cough. A chest radiograph was obtained and shown below. What is the most likely causative organism? So first I want all of you to appreciate what is being shown in the chest x-ray. Now the point is that the moment you see an immunocompromised patient, a chest x-ray is given to you, the first thing that comes to my mind is a pneumocystis carinii. But a pneumocystis carinii pneumonia classically involve the perihilar part. What do you see in this radiograph? It's an immunocompromised patient. An immunocompromised patient, you see small millet-like nodules scattered in both the lung. So this is a hematogenous dissemination of an infection. This is a hematogenous dissemination of an infection, and which is called as miliary nodules. In an immunocompromised patient, if you are seeing miliary nodules, think of TB. Think of miliary TB, and the answer is Mycobacterium tuberculosis. Mycobacterium tuberculosis. Now, if you ask me, can histoplasmosis? Yes, it may be, but the more common cause is Mycobacterium. Okay. There are many causes of miliary nodules, but in an Indian setting, in an immunocompromised patient, hematogenous dissemination of the TB, because the host immunity has gone down and the TB flares up through the hematogenous route, and that should be the answer. Okay. All right. Next question. Now see, so many questions based on thoracic imaging. So make sure that a chest imaging, chest and neuro. Now when you talk about application of the radiology, these are the two things which are very commonly asked in the clinical based exams. A 3-year-old child while playing develops sudden onset of breathlessness and wheezing. Now please remember, there are certain dictums in the MCQ. 3-year-old child while playing. Okay. On auscultation, significantly decreased breath sounds were seen in the right lung. Breath sounds are reduced. Chest radiograph showed diffusely opaque right hemithorax. Now what has happened is, this is the trachea, this is the bronchus. Now there he has ingested a foreign body, and this foreign body has blocked the bronchus, and as a result of which there is an obstructive collapse of the right lung. Because of the obstructive collapse, there is a opaque hemithorax. Okay, and the breath sounds were reduced because the air is not going over there. So this is a case of a foreign body aspiration. Pneumothorax cannot be opaque, or cannot be opaque. Pneumonia can be opaque, but it will not be diffusely opaque. It will be a focal area. Bronchial asthma will not have an opacity over here. So this is the only answer that is left. And a 3-year-old child while playing develop respiratory distress. Think of a foreign body. 40-year-old truck driver. Think of an immunocompromised patient. These are the standard dictum in the MCQ exams, and if you're preparing for that, you have to be aware about these dictums. Okay, another labeling kind of question. A 43-year-old female presented with mild fever and chest. Okay, so basically this was not the exact question. It was more about the question, and you have to identify the label structure, and this was the structure that was labeled. Okay, so structure number 9 that was labeled. So most of the time the problem that student faces is regarding the portal vein or inferior vena cava. So here I'll tell you something. Now this is what we commonly say in our conventional teaching. This I call it as a line versus dot principle. Now what is a line versus dot principle? That means if you are taking a cross section, please understand, if you are taking a cross section and if there is any vertical vessel in the body, it will be seen as a dot, and if it's any horizontal vessel in the body, it will be seen as a line. So please remember, this line versus dot principle will be very helpful for you in identifying the vessel. Aorta is a vertical vessel, so when you take a cross section, it will be seen as a circle or a dot. IVC is a vertical vessel, so on a transverse section, it will be seen as a circle or a dot. Portal vein is a horizontal vessel, so on a transverse section, it will be seen as a line. So this is a line that you are seeing. So this is portal vein. This is portal vein that was shown to you. Okay, please ignore this question. It was copied from the previous slide. So the question was very simple. It was more about identify the structure that has been marked. Okay, now what do you see in this particular image? So 35-year-old female presented, I will show you the image on the other side. 35-year-old female presented with dysphagia, which is more marked for liquid. Okay, please remember, if it says more marked for liquid, that means you are dealing with a case of a motility disorder. Okay, the examiner is making your life slightly easy. Okay, so this is a motility disorder. Barium swallow image is shown below. So you are seeing a markedly dilated esophagus with narrowing at the lower esophagus in the lesion of the distal esophageal sphincter. And what do you see? This is a typical image which is called as a bird beak appearance, an image of achalasia accardia. Now if I change this question and I say that the dysphagia is more marked for solid, then probably I am dealing with an obstructive cause, and then probably I would have thought in terms of carcinoma esophagus. So this clinical history is making your life much easier in such case. Okay, what is the diagnosis of the given enema image? We have seen such kind of images in our classes also. Now what do you see is, this is the barium enema. You could see the telescoping of the bowel loop within another segment, and that is a typically giving a claw sign. So that claw sign is a feature of intussusception. Colon cancer classically give apple core appearance, whereas ulcerative colitis shows mucosal granularity to begin with, and then loss of ostration. Whereas ileocecal TB will be seen at the ileocecal level, and there are a lot of signs like a Fleischner sign, a purse string suture, purse string appearance, pulled up cecum. All these are the important features of the ileocecal TB. Okay, next image. A supine abdominal radiograph of a 2-year-old child is given below. What is the possible diagnosis? Now in this, the diagnosis is predominantly dependent on how you can identify the image. What you could see is the supine radiograph of the abdomen. Now you could see this ligament, and this is the falciform ligament. Now why this ligament is seen? Because it is surrounded by air all around. Okay, it is surrounded by the air all around, and you could also see the bowel wall. So this is called as Wriggler sign. Now why Wriggler? Why this is seen? Because the air is present in the bowel loop, outside the bowel loop, and as a result of which you are able to see the bowel wall. Okay, visualization of the falciform ligament and the bowel wall, visualization of bowel wall is called as a Wriggler sign. So this is a case of pneumoperitoneum. duodenal atresia will show double bubble appearance. Double bubble appearance. Subcutaneous emphysema is usually present in the chest. Pneumatosis intestinalis will be seen in the form of small foci of air within the wall of the bowel. So this is a case of a pneumoperitoneum. Okay. A 26-year-old patient presented with pain in the right hypochondriac region. On USG, water lily sign is seen. Now this is a typical factual question. A water lily sign is diagnostic for hydatid cyst. Okay, hydatid cyst. Okay, though it is classically described on a chest, but it can also be described on the ultrasound of the abdomen. On the ultrasound of the abdomen, there is another sign that has been described, which is called as cartwheel appearance. Okay, cartwheel appearance. So this is a case of hydatid cyst. Okay. Another integrated question where a radiological image, you can link it with orthopedic, you can link it with anatomy, but all that matters is you should be able to pick up the correct answer. The arrow in the below radiograph is pointing to which anatomical structure? So you know it is the elbow radiograph. Okay, this bone is humerus, this is radius, and this is ulna. Okay, now you know that the radius is articulating over here with the capitellum. Ulna is with trochlea. The medial part is medial epicondyle. The lateral part is lateral epicondyle. And on a frontal radiograph, olecranon process will not be seen because that is posteriorly in the posteriorly projecting up over here. So this is capitellum. This structure that has been marked is the capitellum. Okay. Alright. A 5-year-old boy is unable to pronate and supinate since childhood. That means there is some congenital disorder that has happened. He is not able to pronate and supinate. Radiograph of the forearm in the frontal and the oblique projection is given below. Now you could see the radiograph. Now you know that you are seeing the radius and ulna. And you know that the supination and pronation is occurring at the radio-ulnar joint. Now see what is happening over here. See, the proximal radius and the ulna are fused to each other. There is a bony fusion between them, and that is a radio-ulnar synostosis. That's a radio-ulnar synostosis. Myositis ossificans, when involving the subcutaneous tissue and the soft tissue, this is not. Radial head dislocation, there would have been a history of a trauma and it will not be since the birth, so that cannot be there. And I don't see any fracture of the ulna over here, so this is definitely not a Monteggia fracture dislocation. So the answer is radio-ulnar synostosis. Okay. A 45-year-old patient with tingling, numbness and paresthesia in his lower extremity came for MRI examination, which is shown below. Okay, so that's an MRI. You could see the lumbar spine. You could see that at the level when it takes a turn, that is L5S1 level. Okay, L5SN level. This is the normal intervertebral disc. Okay, since the fluid appears so white, so this is inherently a T2 weighted MRI. Okay, T2 weighted MRI. Okay, if I go one level up, so that's not normally asked or cannot be asked in a screening paper, but because the bone marrow which contain fat is black, so this is basically T2 weighted minus fat, and we commonly call them as a star MRI. So that's a star MRI. Okay, now what do you see? This is the normal intervertebral disc. Now normally the disc does not cross the vertebral margin, but here seeing the disc is getting herniated. So there is a disc herniation. There is a disc herniation, and this disc herniation is seen at L5S1 level. Okay, now a lot of students have told us that rather than this they have given only L3, L4, L5S1. So please remember that is not possible. It is an intervertebral disc. So an intervertebral disc has to be between two vertebrae. It has to be between two vertebrae. So it has to be L1, L2, L2, L3, L3, 4, L4, 5. It cannot be L3 or L4. the nerve root might be there, but when you talk about the disc, it has to be L12, L23, L34, L45. So this is an L5S1 intervertebral disc. And all these questions are recall questions. Okay, so the whole idea of giving you these recall questions is just to tell you that this is the pattern in which the examiners are asking question nowadays. So you should be ready with this particular pattern, because once your understanding is right, if a similar pattern question is asked in the exam, you will be able to answer that much more confidently. Okay, alright. A 35-year-old patient with a history of recurrent UTI came for the IVP, and the image is shown below. Now what do you see in the image? Now this is an IVP image, and you could see that there is a duplicated system. Now we know that in a duplicated system, there is a law that is called as Wiegert-Mayer law. Wiegert-Mayer law. Now according to Wiegert-Mayer law, in a duplicated system, the upper pole moiety ureter is ectopic. Please remember, in a duplicated system, the upper pole moiety ureter is ectopic, and it opens distal and medial to the lower pole moiety ureter. That means if this is the bladder, this is the trigone where the normal ureter is opening. If I draw the kidney over here, which is a duplicated kidney, so there are two ureters that are coming. The lower ureter is opening normally, and the upper ureter is opening distal and medial to the lower pole moiety ureter. Distal and medial to the lower pole moiety ureter. So it says on the basis of spot IVP image, location the insertion of the ureter of the left upper pole moiety. It will be at the trigone. No, that will be the lower pole moiety. Below and medial to the trigone of the bladder. Yes. Above the dome of the bladder. No. In the prostatic urethra. Yes, it could be in the prostatic urethra, but below and medial to the trigone of the bladder is the single best answer for this particular question. Okay. Now what is your interpretation of the given image? That's a standard image in every image based paper. You expect that, where you see the ureter whose terminal end is dilated like this, and this is called as cobra head or adder head appearance. A cobra head or an adder head appearance. And since this is bilateral in this particular image, on both the sides, this is a bilateral ureterocele. This is an image of a bilateral ureterocele. Okay. Now what is your interpretation of the given HSG image? Now this is the cannula that you could see. Now this is the uterus. Now we have seen the normal HSG, and this is how the normal uterus look like. But what do you see is only one cornua. So this is a unicornuate uterus. This is an image of a unicornuate uterus. A septate uterus, you will be seeing a septa in this bicornuate, you will be seeing the two separate horns. Okay, and the diadelphus when the uterus is completely divided into two. So this is an image of a unicornuate uterus. Okay, there were few difficult questions from the radiotherapy also in the exam. Prophylactic craniospinal irradiation is done for which cancer? So please remember, when you do the radiotherapy, usually what we are doing is you identify a lesion and you give the radiotherapy, but there are few cancers in which prophylactic radiations are given. Now the reason of giving these prophylactic radiations is because of the research. We know that if these cancers are there, the chances of having the intracranial metastasis are so high that even if you are not able to appreciate them on the imaging, there are chances that the micrometastasis has occurred, and it is better to kill the micrometastasis at the level when it is not apparent on the imaging. Now one of the commonest cancer for which it is done is a small cell cancer of the lung. Small cell cancer of the lung is one of the commonest cancer for which prophylactic cranial irradiation is done. Now this is commonly called as PCI, prophylactic cranial irradiation. The most common site of metastasis from small cell cancer of the lung is considered to the brain, and the book says that even if you don't see metastasis in the brain, by the time small cell cancer has been diagnosed, please remember it has metastasized to the brain. So there is always, this is a part in the treatment protocol that prophylactic cranial irradiation should be done. Okay. Non-Hodgkin lymphoma, there is an indication of the PCI, but not for the Hodgkin's lymphoma. Okay. A patient with brain metastasis had to undergo head and neck irradiation. What is the most common delayed symptom with head and neck irradiation? It's a factual question. Just remember, xerostomia. Xerostomia or the dryness is one of the commonest symptom that is gonna see because of the head and neck irradiation. Okay. All right, guys. So these were the questions that were there in the exam that were asked. All I will say about the radiology questions, that irrespective of the level of exam that you are doing, if your understanding of the radiology is right, as we have done in our usual classes, that even if it's a slightly tricky question and your understanding of your clinical subject is right, you will be able to do that. So do not see any radiological part as an exclusive part. In majority of time, it's a combination of that, and that is why we emphasize a lot to learn radiology, because it will not just helpful in solving the isolated question of the radiology, it will be extremely useful for solving all those clinical questions where radiology is playing a contributory part in solving that. And as we are seeing the trend, the number of questions which are dependent on the radiological image, it is same as that the dependence of our treatment is there on the radiology. Similarly, now in an MCQ paper also, there has become a lot of dependence on the radiological images, because every clinical specialty is using some or other radiological image for diagnosis or for prognosis or for better treatment options available. So that is the trend that is percolating in the MCQs also. So make sure that once you are going for the exam, your radiological knowledge is very, very sound. It should be very, very sound. Okay, so that's all about these recall questions of the exam. Okay. All right, so that's all about this image based session. And if you have questions with me, you can put it on to the WhatsApp, and I will answer them individually onto that. If you want these images, just give me some days and I will be uploading them onto my Telegram group also, and as well as onto the my Facebook group also. And it's Dr. Rajat Radiology Discussion Group on Facebook. Okay, you will be in the download section, I will be uploading them, the images, but give me some time. In another 3-4 days I will be uploading it, all the labeled images that I have shown you, so you can download them and you can use it for a quick for the quick revision. Do let me know. You all know my WhatsApp number, but since in case somebody has missed it, that's my WhatsApp number. Feel free to interact with me, feel free to talk to me. If I can be of any help, that would be great. Okay, all right, thank you very much for your time.